Imagine strolling through woods. Flocks erupt rapidly from those branches. One buck halts, gazes at you bearing pupils the scale of serving platters, before sprinting as if recalling an incredibly urgent daily meeting. That chipmunk repeats the habit, where it darts 2 paces, pauses, darts 2 paces, pauses, essentially experiencing an absolute psychological breakdown since you breathe, and simply stand around right there wearing outdoor footwear, chewing some protein snack. Thus, what is genuinely happening right now? How come wildlife, beasts which possess fangs, toxins, antlers, quickness, plus occasionally an instinct to physically sever their personal appendages, why are they fearful of people? Regarding squishy, sluggish, largely balding primates that become breathless ascending 2 sets of stairs, this explanation runs much further than anyone imagines. Plus, truthfully, when you finally grasp it, you'll never view an anxious chipmunk that exact way anymore. Let's begin right at the start. Here's a fact which might possibly make anyone feel slightly uneasy. That terror which wildlife holds for mankind didn't begin last century. It didn't commence when mankind created rifles or farming or even flames. It originated millions of years back. Researchers use one phrase for this: the landscape of dread. It's the concept that hunted creatures don't simply react to hunters when they're standing right before their faces. They mold their whole existence around the likelihood of some hunter remaining close. Their eating routines, their resting places, where they sip water, when they travel, all of this is adjusted toward escaping mortality. Plus, for a very, very extended period, ancient people remained part of this equation. Our forefathers hunted a ton. Stone Age mankind were persistent stalkers, signifying we didn't necessarily possess the quickness to outpace targets. However, we possessed something arguably more horrifying. We simply kept walking for hours through the warmth of the afternoon, until that beast dropped from fatigue. If you were a gazelle, and you noticed a strange 2-legged monster in the horizon, trotting at a moderate speed, that was truly one of the most horrifying sights you could witness. Thus, beasts adapted, not individually, but generationally. Those creatures that didn't flee from human-shaped shadows got devoured. Those animals that did flee lived, bred, and transferred that caution down to their descendants. Continue this cycle across thousands of generations. Then you produce wildlife that are basically pre-programmed with mankind dread wired into their genetics. It's not a taught trait, it's a survival algorithm, the ultimate hunter hypothesis. Now here's where details become genuinely intriguing and a little bit complimentary, truthfully. During 2016, a group of scientists at the University of Western Ontario released a paper which delivered a pretty crazy assertion. They claimed that humans represent, and I'm quoting now, the ultimate hunter, signifying we are dreaded by rival carnivores more than they dread one another. They broadcast sound tapes toward wildlife, not of rival hunters, not of tigers growling or coyotes crying. Only the noise of people conversing, relaxed chatting, the type of stuff you'd notice near a transit stop. Plus, the findings were astounding. Cougars retreated at more than double the speed they retreated from different rival hunters. Lynxes, bucks, badgers, raccoons, they all sprinted quicker and stronger from people speaking than from any different danger. Certain hunters, creatures that don't face biological rivals, still reacted, showing the identical fearful reaction toward human noises. Ponder upon that. A puma cat, a top carnivore, a beast which slaughters bucks for breakfast, sprinting far from the noise of somebody talking regarding their weekend schedule. Why? Because even top hunters retain a historical recollection regarding people being lethal. We stalked them, also. We forced them outside of territories. We slaughtered them whenever they wandered too near to farm animals. Through time, even the peak of the food pyramid realized mankind meant danger. We're not merely frightening since we're hunters. We're terrifying since we're erratic hunters. Plus, unpredictability inside the wild kingdom remains basically the most horrifying concept there is, the unpredictability dilemma. Let's discuss why unpredictability represents such a massive, crucial issue. Most hunters follow routines. A coyote stalks during sunrise and twilight. A gator strikes near water. A falcon catches tiny mammals across open meadows. Hunted creatures have adapted across millions of years to interpret these behaviors, and recognizing the routine is what keeps them breathing. A buck which learns where the canines hunt can bypass that zone. A trout which realizes when the stork eats can swim deeper throughout those periods. However, humans, we stalk in the morning and at midnight. We stalk in packs and solely. We employ flames, snares, javelins, arrows, guns, robots. We stalk on ground, in lakes, from aircrafts. We slay creatures we consume, and creatures we don't consume. We track beasts which are lethal, and beasts which are entirely peaceful. From a wildlife perspective, there is no routine for us. We represent a variable they cannot resolve. Plus, when one can't resolve a variable, the only logical reaction is maximum evasion during all moments. There's truly a principle within behavioral ecology termed hunter recognition. Plus, it explains how hunted creatures classify dangers. Most hunters become organized into familiar groupings. Large feline, fowl of prey, canine. Creatures possess tailored adjusted reactions for each grouping. However, people don't fit smoothly within any grouping. We smell strange. We move oddly. We produce odd sounds. Plus, then occasionally we feed pigeons at a square for 20 minutes. We break the algorithm. Plus, that's deeply, deeply disturbing to a wildlife mind. Yet hold, what about creatures that aren't afraid of mankind? Great inquiry, since you've certainly spotted doves at a metro plaza that would sooner perish than step out of your path. You've noticed trash pandas that stare you straight into the pupils while consuming your trash. Gulls which will snatch a fry straight from your palm and sustain direct vision the whole period to project supremacy. Thus, what's happening over there? This is termed habituation. Plus, it's one of the most crucial ideas within wildlife biology. Whenever beasts are consistently subjected to a trigger, people in this scenario, without suffering adverse outcomes, they slowly lessen their panic reaction. It's essentially the mind stating, "This object keeps popping up, yet nothing terrible occurs. I'm wasting effort acting afraid of it," lowering the danger status. City wildlife go through this cycle across generations. Metro doves have been dwelling alongside humans for so long that the panic reaction has basically been eliminated. There's zero survival benefit to fleeing from humans if humans literally toss crumbs at you every morning. Same regarding ravens, which leads us toward one of the most fascinating cases. Ravens not merely adapt to humans, they literally identify unique faces. Reports have proven that ravens recall particular individuals who have offended them and will bother those people for years. They'll enlist fellow ravens to pitch in. They'll train their offspring, which people remain hazardous. Thus, not merely have ravens shed their terror of people, they've basically formed a culture regarding human monitoring. They're keeping mental records regarding us, which is either super awesome or truly horrifying, depending on how much you've annoyed a raven lately. The isolated experiment, which shifted everything. Now, here's one of the most brain-melting pieces of proof regarding why wildlife dread mankind. Plus, it derives from a biological experiment which occurred across the seas upon islands and within zones where mankind has never visited or where mankind has remained absent for extended times. Wildlife display virtually zero panic reaction at all. The Galapagos archipelago represent perhaps the most famous instance. When Darwin reached there during the 1830s, he felt confused. The creatures simply didn't scatter. He noted within his diary regarding resting beside fowls that didn't flutter off, shoving lizards toward the ocean, and observing them peacefully paddle back and rest beside him once more. Aquatic lizards, blue-footed boobies, massive tortoises. None of them bolted, none of them bothered. The identical phenomenon occurs within regions of Antarctica. Penguins possess basically zero terror of mankind. They'll stroll right up towards scientists, examine their gear, sometimes attempt to swipe items. Researchers conducting field studies must fend away inquisitive penguins which are intrigued by their lenses and rucksacks. Plus, within aquatic sanctuaries where trawling has been forbidden for decades, aquatic populations begin shedding their terror of snorkelers. Experts have recorded trout within guarded sectors which actively paddle toward people, whereas trout in neighboring unguarded sectors escape. The takeaway is remarkably clear. The terror of mankind is not a default configuration. It's programmed via exposure. Whenever people cease being a danger, whether because they were never present or because slaughtering paused, the terror fades, occasionally within merely a handful generations. Which implies the terror isn't regarding humans individually. It's regarding what humans do, the biology of terror, and what it truly causes to environments. Here's where stuff becomes highly fascinating. Since this terror isn't merely a weird wildlife trait, it transforms whole environments. Biologists analyzing canines at Yellowstone National Reserve uncovered something surprising. When canines were brought to the reserve during 1995, the buck population didn't merely shrink, it altered habits. Bucks ceased feeding within exposed fields. They shunned waterways. They traveled differently and wasted less time within open zones. Plus, since bucks ceased heavily chewing these zones, the foliage grew back. Streams shifted paths because the dirt degradation slowed down. Saplings sprouted again. Fowl types reappeared. Aquatic groups recovered because the rivers grew purer. All of this because the canines made the bucks frightened. The terror itself, not merely the slaughter, was pushing environmental transformation. This is what biologists name a landscape of terror. Plus, it's one of the most potent hidden dynamics within nature. Now connect this to humans. Whenever people invade a zone as stalkers or merely as a constant fixture, the identical terror reaction triggers on. Beasts travel differently. They shun particular zones throughout particular hours. They alter their eating routines. Nighttime activity rises because shadows offer protection. Creatures which used to remain busy during daylight adjust their routines to decrease contact with mankind. A 2018 paper released within journals discovered that wildlife across 6 landmasses had grown significantly more nightbound as reaction toward human interference. Beasts which were formerly busy throughout the morning were transitioning toward darkness, not due to ecosystem ruination, but merely because people remained nearby. The sheer existence of mankind was sufficient to rebuild the routine timetable of animals across the globe. We're not merely hunters. We're a massive environmental power that's physically shifting whenever creatures choose to stay conscious.
It's the odor issue.
All right, let's discuss stuff nobody actually desires to ever hear. Wildlife could also be frightened of mankind because we reek utterly terrible to them. Human odor is a truly strong synthetic marker in the outdoors. We transport a mixture of artificial formulas, antiperspirants, cleaners, washing powders, snacks, polymers, fumes, several different items we don't wish to ponder too deeply regarding, which remains entirely foreign to wild environments. Even if you remove all of this aside and simply discuss organic human skin stench, the marker is still potent and recognizable. Hunter pee is frequently utilized as a repellent within nature control, since creatures interpret smell as a major danger marker. Human odor has been proven to cause comparable reactions. Whenever experts placed odor fabrics drenched in human perspiration beside nature lenses, the drop of creature movement was similar to placing fabrics drenched in puma cat pee. Let that settle deep. You breathing, projecting out the smell of remaining alive, are nearly as terrifying for native animals as a puma cat. Several of you are already conscious of this and treat it like a character quirk. That's all right. Why some creatures strike instead of fleeing? Now, valid inquiry. If creatures are so terrified of people, why do some of them strike? Plus, the explanation here is almost constantly the identical. They're not striking out of anger. They're striking out of hopelessness. The overwhelming bulk of lethal wildlife interactions occur in one of 3 situations. Firstly, the beast feels trapped and possesses zero getaway path. Secondly, the beast is a parent guarding babies. Thirdly, the beast has been forced into tight nearness with people via ecosystem ruin and is functioning beneath severe panic. In virtually every scenario, the strike is a final option. It's not hunting, it's protective. Grizzlies are a prime instance. Grizzlies are biologically highly evasive toward people. Offered any logical chance, a grizzly will depart. The issue is that when mankind expansion stretches into grizzly territory, the space for evasion grows tighter. Grizzlies are left with reduced choices, scarce meals, and increased mandatory human interaction. Plus, whenever an already panicked beast possessing zero getaway path gets startled at tight distance, it responds the manner any creature, including people, would respond. It goes on attack. There are true outliers. Arctic grizzlies are one. They're one of the rare massive hunters which will purposefully stalk people. Yet even this grows less shocking once you realize that Arctic grizzlies adapted within a habitat possessing basically zero massive hunters except themselves. Very scarce meal options, and absolutely nothing which could have trained them to dread 2-legged monsters. They merely never acquired the message. What occurs whenever wildlife have never encountered mankind previously? The most shocking proof for all of this arrives from initial meeting scenarios. instances where human travelers or scientists discover beasts which have had zero prior contact with mankind. The outcomes are constantly the identical. Zero terror, none. Ancient records regarding oceanic voyaging detail mariners strolling over toward fowls, which had never noticed mankind previously, and snatching them up. Past stories regarding the dodo, famously wiped out today, mostly due to this, detail a beast so completely unafraid of people that slaughtering them demanded practically zero exertion. They would stroll toward the killers. The mariners assumed they were foolish. They weren't foolish. They simply hadn't been trained to act terrified yet. The exact trend appears within current situations. Whenever scientists access distant groups, specific secluded bug types, deep ocean monsters pulled upwards for the initial moment, the panic reaction remains missing or negligible. Plus, this offers humans a glimpse regarding how the planet appeared before mankind grew into such an overpowering force. Not a planet lacking peril, rather a planet where the peril didn't stride vertically and didn't arrive from everywhere at once. The biological weapons competition. Here's the awkward philosophical spot humans arrive at whenever one shoves matters far enough. The terror that wildlife holds toward people isn't a flaw. It's correct. It's a proper assessment regarding the scenario. Mankind has triggered the annihilation of hundreds of creatures. We've slaughtered populations toward ruin. We've altered or ruined beyond half of every biological ecosystem across Earth. We've shifted the worldwide weather. The beasts which act frightened of people are mathematically talking making the proper choice. Yet here's the catch. Due to this terror, since creatures run, evade, and conceal themselves away, people frequently don't notice the massive breadth of the damage we're causing. Nature goes unseen. People visit the wilderness and spot fewer and fewer, and people translate this as biology doing okay. The lack of wildlife translates as tranquility instead of escape. The panic truly makes it simpler for people to ignore whatever we're doing. Plus, the harshest element regarding the landscape of terror is this. It acts against preservation, also. Creatures which are extremely terrified of people remain tougher to analyze, tougher to guard, tougher to assist. Terror forms a barrier, which locks scientists away and stops wildlife from gaining from mankind preservation. The highly damaged creature groups remain constantly the most inaccessible ones. The frail string of habituation and why it counts. However, let's finish upon something a bit more optimistic, since this is truly one of the most fascinating developments occurring within animal biology right now. Experts are continually discovering that offered the proper circumstances, steady non-hostile mankind existence, meal reliability, lowered slaughtering threats, wildlife can and will readapt toward people across incredibly brief time periods. Highland ape travel initiatives within Rwanda and Uganda have recorded primate factions which transitioned from escaping guards upon contact toward accepting and, in certain instances, apparently liking the nearness of mankind watchers across the span of simply a couple years of meticulous, polite adaptation efforts. Not since the apes forgot to feel terrified, rather since they were handed sufficient data points to upgrade their framework, those particular people within this particular zone. Steady, non-hostile, zero bad consequences. The panic is acquired, and adaptation can swing both directions. Restored regions, zones where mankind's slaughtering and interference have been eliminated, display wildlife slowly regaining their biological movement routines. Sunlight feeding restores. Exposed sector usage restores. The tense, ultra-cautious conduct of severely tracked groups softens. The landscape of terror can be disassembled. It merely demands people to remain dependably, constantly, demonstrably not a danger. Plus, considering our past history, that's a task. Creatures act terrified of humans since mankind spent millions of years building that terror. We remain the most adaptable, relentless, erratic, and biologically overpowering hunter this Earth has ever generated. We stalk every landmass within every environment at every moment. We don't match any routine which wildlife minds understand how to analyze. We've pushed types extinct across every landmass we've ever placed steps onto. We shift environments by merely remaining nearby. The chipmunk experiencing a meltdown upon the grass isn't acting theatrical. It's executing a survival protocol that's been polished across hundreds of thousands of years. It genuinely does not realize that you're merely attempting to consume a protein snack and admire outdoors. Yet here's the catch. That identical intellect which rendered humans so horrifying, The innovation, the flexibility, the raw potential remains also whatever permits mankind to decide otherwise. The creatures which dwell inside zones where people remain consistently harmless don't flee, they don't conceal. They exist outside, within the open, under the sunshine, progressing through their days, without committing massive quantities of effort toward endless watchfulness. That edition of the planet exists. It exists across patches, inside sanctuaries, upon islands where the trial ran long enough. The landscape of terror is never everlasting. It's an echo of actions, plus an action can shift. The dilemma is whether we're fascinating enough to